Whilomville Stories Part 12, The City, Urchin and Chaste Village as Stephen Crane Short Stories. After the brief encounters between the hedge boy and Jimmy Trescott and the hedge boy and Willie Dalzell, the neighbourhood which contained the homes of the boys was, as far as child life is concerned, in a state resembling anarchy. This was owing to the signal overthrow of a fucking retreat shameful boy who had several years led a certain little clan by the nose. The adherents of the little community did not go necessarily to the boy who could whip all the others, but it certainly could not go to a boy who had run away in a manner that made his shame patent to the whole world. Willie Dalzell found himself in a painful position. This tiny tribe which had followed him with such unwavering faith was now largely engaged in whistling and catcalling and hooting. He chased a number of them into the sanctity of their own yards, but from these cones they continued to ridicule him. It's back. I hate Windows Vista Basic because I can't do this. That's the only thing I like about it. Plus, it's ugly at the top. I can't change the border to black when I want it black. Black, see? Whereas it's an ugly, horrible blue, too bright. Where's that thing gone? Leave me alone forever. But it must not suppose that the fickle tribe went in a body to a new light. They did nothing of the sort. They occupied themselves with avenging all which they had endured gladly enough, too, for many months. As for the hedge boy, he maintained a curious, timid reserve, minding his own business with extreme care, and going to school, with that deadly punctuality of which his mother was the genius. Jimmy Trescott suffered no adverse criticism from his fellows. He was entitled to be beaten by a boy who had made Willie Dalzell bellow like a bull calf and run away. Indeed, he received some honours. He had confronted a very superior boy and received a bang in the eye, which for a time was the wonder of the children, and he had not bellowed like a bull calf. As a matter of fact, he was often invited to tell how it had felt, and this he did with some pride, claiming arrogantly that he had been superior to any particular pain. Early in the episode, he and the hedge boy had patched up a treaty. Living next door to each other, they could not fail to have each other often in sight. One afternoon they wandered together in the strange, indefinite diplomacy of boyhood. As they drew close, the new boy suddenly said, "Napple?" "Yes," said Jimmy, and the new boy bestowed upon him an apple. It was one of those green-coated winter apples which lie for many months in safe and dry places, and can at any time be brought forth for the persecution of the unwary and inexperienced. An older age would have fled from this apple, but to the unguided youth of Jimmy Trescott it was a thing to be possessed and cherished, wherefore this apple was the emblem of something more than a truce, despite the fact that it tasted like wet Indian meal. And Jimmy looked at the hedge boy out of one good eye and one bunged eye. The long-drawn animosities of men have no place in the life of a boy. The boy's mind is flexible. He readjusts his position with an ease which is derived from the fact simply that he is not yet a man. But there were other and more important matters. Johnny Hedges' exploits had brought him into such prominence among the schoolboys that it was necessary to settle a number of points once and for all. There was the usual number of boys in the school who were popularly known to be champions in their various classes. Among these, Johnny Hedge now had to thread his way, every boy taking it upon himself to feel anxious that Johnny's exact position should be soon established. His fame as a fighter had gone forth to the world, but there were other boys who had fame as fighters, and the world was extremely anxious to know where to place the newcomer. Various heroes were urged to attempt this classification. Usually it is not accounted a matter of supreme importance, but in this boy life it was essential. In all cases the heroes were backward enough. It was their followings who agitated the question, and so Jimmy Hedge was more or less beset. He maintained his bashfulness, he backed away from altercation. It was plain that to bring matters to a point he must be forced into a quarrel. It was also plain that a proper person for the business was some boy who could whip Willie Dalzell, and these formidable warriors were distinctly averse to undertaking the new contract. It is a kind of a law in boy life that a quiet, decent, peace-loving lad is able to thrash a wide-mouthed talker, and so it had transpired that by a peculiar system of elimination most of the real chiefs were quiet, decent, peace-loving boys, and they had no desire to engage in a fight with a boy on the sole grounds that it was not known who could whip. Johnny Hedge attended his affairs, they attended their affairs, and around them waged this discussion of relative merit. Jimmy Trescott took a prominent part in these arguments. He contended that Johnny Hedge could thrash any boy in the world. He was certain of it, and to anyone who opposed him he said, "You just get one of those smashes in the eye, and then you'll see." In the meantime there was a grand and impressive silence in the direction of Willie Dalzell. He had gathered remnants of his clan, but the main parts of his sovereignty were scattered to the winds. He was an enemy. Owing to the circumspect behaviour of the new boy, the commotions on the school grounds came to nothing. He was often asked, "Can you lick him?" and he invariably replied, "I dunno." This idea of waging battle with the entire world appalled him. A war for complete supremacy of the tribe, which had been headed by Willie Dalzell, was fought out in the country of the tribe. It came to pass that a chieftain, half-dime blood and thunder pamphlet, had a great vow in the tribe at this particular time. This story relates the experience of a lad who began his career as a cabin boy on a pirate ship. Throughout the first 15 chapters he was rope's-ended from one end of the ship to the other end, and very often he was felled to the deck by a heavy fist. He lived through enough hardships to have killed a battalion of Turkish soldiers, but in the end he rose upon them. Yes, he rose upon them. Hordes of pirates fell before his intrepid arm, and in the last chapters of the book he is seen jauntily careering on his own hook as one of the most callous pirate captains that ever sailed the seas. Naturally, when this tale was thoroughly understood by the tribe, they had to dramatize it, although it was a dramatization that would gain no royalties for the author. Now it was plain that the urchin who was cast for the cabin boy's part would lead a life throughout the first 15 chapters which would attract few actors. Willie Dalzell developed a scheme by which some small lad would play cabin boy during this period of misfortune and abuse, and then when the cabin boy came to the part where he slew all his enemies and reached his zenith, that he, Willie Dalzell, should take the part. This fugitive and disconnected rendering of a great play opened in Jimmy Trescott's back garden. The path between the two lines of gooseberry bushes was elected unanimously to the ship. Then Willie Dalzell insisted that Homer Phelps should be the cabin boy. Homer tried the position for a time, and then elected that he would resign in favour of some other victim. There was no other applicant to succeed him, whereupon it became necessary to press some boy. Jimmy Trescott was a great actor, but as well is known, but he steadfastly refused to engage for the part. Ultimately they seized upon little Dan Earl, whose disposition was so milky and docile that he would do whatever anybody asked of him. But Dan Earl made the one firm revolt of his life after trying existence as cabin boy for some 10 minutes. Willie Dalzell was in despair. Then he suddenly sighted the little brother of Johnny Hedge, who had come into the garden, and in a poor little stranger sort of fashion was looking wistfully at the play. When he was invited to become the cabin boy, he accepted joyfully, thinking that it was his initiation into the tribe. Then they proceeded to give him the rope's end and to punch him with a realism which was not altogether painless. Directly he began to cry out, they exhorted him not to cry out, not to mind it, but still they continued to hurt him. There was a commotion among the gooseberry bushes. 2 branches were swept aside, and Johnny Hedge walked down upon them. Every boy stopped in his tracks. Johnny was boiling with rage. "Who hurt him?" he said ferociously. "Did you?" He had looked at Willie Dalzell. Willie Dalzell began to mumble. We was only playing, nothing for him to cry for." The new boy had at his command some big phrases, and he used them. "I am going to whip you within an inch of your life. I'm going to tear the hide off from you." And immediately there was a mixture and infusion of 2 boys which looked as if it had been done by a chemist. The other children stood back, stricken with horror, but out of this whirl they presently perceived the figure of Willie Dalzell, seated upon the chest of the hedge boy. "Got enough?" asked Willie hoarsely.